Finally, that's all she said after kissing him, right in front of me, and it didn't even come with a flinch. No apology, no panic, no guilt. Just that one word like a period at the end of a sentence she'd been writing behind my back for months. I hadn't moved. I was still holding the plastic wine glass I'd been nursing all night, fingers numb, knees locked, heart pounding like I'd just been told a plane was going down and I had no seatbelt. It happened beneath a rotating LED chandelier that looked like something from a billionaire's dentist office. The music was low, but I remember the bass. It thudded once right after the kiss, as if the building itself had seen it and needed a moment. And no one else saw. That's the worst part. They were just two shadows behind the corner curtain near the espresso cart. He leaned in casually, like he'd done it 1,000 times. She welcomed it like it wasn't her first kiss of the evening. I saw it. Every detail. His hand on the small of her back. Her little laugh before it happened. Her hand on his chest. His face way too close for a casual, "I love your pitch deck" conversation. Then the kiss. And then she looked at me. Like she knew I'd be there. Like she wanted me to see. Finally. I've tried to make sense of that word for the past 4 hours. It echoes louder than the kiss. It's heavier than the wine. I can't decide if it was relief, cruelty, or a confession that had no interest in being forgiven. Let me rewind. Not to introduce myself, because names don't matter when your identity collapses in an instant, but to explain how I ended up watching my wife kiss someone else at a party I didn't even want to attend. Let me tell you about the moment I realized I might have been a placeholder in someone else's life. And worse, I might have always known. After she said it, finally, she didn't wait for a response. She turned her back to me, walked to a high stool near the glowing ice sculpture, and ordered something with elderflower in it like she hadn't just detonated the air between us. I stood there longer than I should have, a statue with a glass and a 1,000-yard stare. A woman in a sequin blazer bumped into me and apologized, and I muttered something that probably wasn't even English. My legs moved on autopilot, carrying me away from the espresso cart, past the DJ booth, and into the hallway outside the main floor. There was a coat rack with a velvet rope around it, like even jackets here had to RSVP. I leaned against the wall and tried to breathe. What was that? What had I just seen? I replayed the kiss in my head, but it was her expression afterward that haunted me. She wasn't shocked to see me. She wasn't caught off guard. It was almost like she expected me to be there, like she wanted to deliver that moment on a silver tray with a flourish. Finally, it wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was loaded, meant for me. And in that one word, there was history. Maybe months of it. Maybe longer. I pulled out my phone. My fingers hovered over her name. I didn't know if I wanted to text, call, or just delete her contact and disappear. Then I noticed the last message she sent me before the party. Just 4 words. "Please don't be late." I had thought she wanted to introduce me to her coworkers. Now I wondered if I was the final guest to her silent play. I went back in. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I was owed something. An explanation, a confession, maybe even a decent lie. She was still sitting there alone, legs crossed, swirling her drink like nothing had shifted. I walked up, and she looked at me without a hint of discomfort. "You saw it, right?" She asked like we were gossiping about a painting or a new outfit. "What the hell was that, Lindra?" My voice cracked, and I hated that. I wanted anger, wanted force, but I sounded like a wet matchstick trying to spark. She sighed. "Not here." Then, grabbing her purse, she stood up, pressed her hand against my chest, and said, "Let's go talk somewhere we don't have to pretend." We ended up in her car. Mine was parked too far, and I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts just yet. Her purse was empty. I remember that for some reason. No wallet, no phone, not even a lipstick. Just a single folded napkin with a phone number written on it in thick blue ink. I sat in the passenger seat, heart hammering. She started the engine but didn't drive. Just sat there in the silence, the streetlights painting her face in soft, guilty strobes. And then she dropped it like it was no big deal. "His name is Des. We met 4 months ago at a design retreat. It wasn't supposed to go past dinner, but it did." No apology. No pause. She didn't look at me when she said it. Just stared straight ahead, like she was reading from a screen in the dark. I said nothing. I didn't trust my mouth to form anything useful. She finally turned toward me, voice quiet. "I didn't plan to fall for him, but I did. And I didn't want to tell you until I knew what it meant. Until I knew if it would last." Something inside me buckled. I didn't know if it was my pride or my heart or both in a fist fight. I looked at her and said the only thing that felt real. So you used me to test your ending. Her eyes flickered, just for a second. That might have been the closest thing to regret I'd get. Then she said something even worse than the kiss. You haven't really looked at me in months, Dale. You look at dinner, at your laptop, at your socks, but not at me. You stopped choosing me a long time ago. I just stopped pretending not to notice. That's when I opened the car door and got out. I didn't slam it. I didn't yell. I just walked into the night air with my head buzzing and my chest full of static. And that's when I realized something I wasn't ready to admit out loud yet. Maybe she was right. But that doesn't make what she did okay. Not even close. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove aimlessly for over 2 hours until I ended up in the parking lot of a 24-hour bowling alley that looked like it hadn't seen a league night since the early 2000s. I didn't go inside. I just parked, turned the engine off, and sat there with my hands on the wheel like the car might still offer me a destination that wasn't this mess. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even call anyone. I just sat in that eerie stillness that comes after your reality gets rewritten by someone else's hands. A quiet like that doesn't feel natural. It's the kind of silence that makes fluorescent lights hum louder, that makes your heartbeat sound like it's coming from the trunk. At some point around 2:30 a.m., I opened my notes app and typed. She said I stopped looking at her. That's all I wrote. I don't know why. I wasn't journaling or documenting. I think I just needed something to confirm the night was real. Something digital, tangible. Because otherwise, the whole thing felt like a hallucination induced by stale brie and overpriced wine. I drove home just before sunrise. The sky was that pale purple that only exists when you're too tired to appreciate it. Our house looked exactly the same. Perfect grass. Porch light still on. The basil plant in the kitchen window still alive. For a moment, it felt like maybe the night hadn't happened. But when I walked through the front door, there was a yellow envelope on the coffee table with my name written on it in her handwriting. Inside was a single page, printed, not handwritten. I'll never forget the first sentence. This isn't a goodbye letter, but I need to pause us. Pause us. Like we were a podcast she wanted to finish later. I read the letter 3 times. It was full of phrases like self-exploration, emotional alignment, and uncertain intimacy. It didn't sound like her. It sounded like someone who read too many self-help articles in one sitting and tried to convert guilt into a language that didn't feel like betrayal. The last line was underlined. Please don't make this ugly. We were never ugly people. I didn't respond. I didn't even text her. I just left the letter on the floor, unopened mail on top of it, like it belonged in the pile of subscription offers and missed dentist appointments. The next day, or maybe the one after, time was weird. I found myself sitting in the spare room we never finished furnishing. It had a broken lamp, a box of winter coats, and her old college books stacked beside a suitcase we never used. I sat there staring at the wall, and that's when I remembered something that nearly made me laugh. 2 months ago, we went to a dinner party at her coworker's house. Fancy, catered, one of those places where the napkins have names. There was a moment during dessert when Lindra dropped her fork and bent to pick it up, and when she sat back up, she looked at me like she was trying to memorize my face. I remember asking her what that look was about. She said, I just wanted to remember this moment. You look good in this light. Now I wonder if that was her goodbye. Her way of stealing one last version of me before she crossed whatever emotional border she'd been tiptoeing toward. And now I wonder how many other quiet goodbyes I missed. How many subtle exits she planted into conversations I thought were just Tuesday nights. 3 days passed before I finally answered one of her texts. All it said was, can we meet somewhere neutral? Not coffee. Not home. Neutral. Like we were adversaries in a Cold War. We met at an old bookstore downtown. Her idea, of course. She said it would be low pressure. She was already sitting near the back, by the travel section, sipping tea and pretending to read a guidebook to Croatia. I sat across from her without speaking, and she put the book down like we were continuing a conversation we'd paused minutes earlier, instead of detonating a marriage in slow motion. I'm not here to convince you, she started, like that somehow made it noble. I just need you to know it wasn't about him. Not entirely. I didn't answer. I was too focused on the fact that she was still wearing the necklace I gave her on our 3rd anniversary. The one with the tiny silver compass. For direction, I joked when I gave it to her. Now it looked like irony dangling from her collarbone. It's about how I felt when I was with him. Seen. Charged. Awake. She looked at me, searching for some kind of validation. I didn't even realize I'd gone numb until I wasn't anymore. That's when I finally spoke. So, I was anesthesia. She flinched. Just barely. But I saw it. And then I asked the question that had been chewing through my insides for days. Was it the first time? Her mouth parted like she was going to lie. Then she closed it. Then opened it again. And finally, she said something so disorienting I had to grip the edge of the table. No. But he's the first one I didn't feel sorry about. There's a moment when someone tells you the truth, and you realize you're never getting your old brain back. You'll never unknow it. You'll never return to the version of yourself that believed the lie. It's like learning the magician's trick, only to discover you were the assistant. And the saw was real. When she said, he's the first one I didn't feel sorry about, something shifted. Not just in me, but in the way the entire room sat around us. The air thinned. The buzz of the bookstore's flickering fluorescent lights suddenly got louder, more deliberate, like they too were listening. I stared at her for a full 10 seconds, waiting for the punchline, the softening, the walk back. None came. She said it with the same energy you'd use to announce you were out of almond milk. She took a slow sip from her water glass after she said it. The most casual movement in the world. But all I could think about was how full the glass was. I don't know why that struck me, how it sat at the brim, untouched, like it hadn't been shaken by what she'd said. Meanwhile, I felt like someone had pulled out my spine and replaced it with dry ice. You've done this before? I asked, voice low and oddly calm. She didn't answer right away. Just looked down at her lap like the story was there, already written. There were moments, she said. Nothing that meant anything. Nothing that would have lasted. They were escape hatches. I didn't even step all the way through most of them. She was talking like she was giving a quarterly report, like I was just the finance guy auditing her impulses. I don't need the inventory, I muttered, maybe louder than I meant to. I need the truth. She looked at me then, really looked. You always think truth and detail are the same thing. And for a split second, I saw her not as my wife, not as the person I built my routines around, but as a stranger who had quietly outgrown me and only just now remembered to let me know. Like I'd been dating the draft version of her while she finalized a completely different document elsewhere. I stood up. I didn't mean to. I think my body made the decision before I did. She reached for my wrist, but I stepped back. Don't, I said, and my voice cracked. That part was real. That part still had weight. I'm not blaming you, Dale, she said softly. I'm just trying to be honest now, when it actually counts. I laughed. It was dry and humorless, and probably a little unhinged. Honesty doesn't count more after the betrayal. That's like leaving someone in a burning building and then texting them the floor plan. She didn't argue. I think she knew better by then. I walked out of the bookstore without a plan. That's been the theme lately. No plan, just damage control. I got in my car and drove to the place where we used to walk our dog, before she got hit by a delivery truck last winter, and we both stopped walking altogether. The bench near the water was still there, still cracked in the same place on the left armrest. I sat on it and stared at the pond, waiting for my thoughts to stop racing each other into dead ends. That's when something new crept in. Not rage, not grief, not confusion, suspicion. There was something about her timing. The way she said, finally, the night of the kiss. The way she wanted me to see it. The letter already printed and waiting. The calmness in her voice when she talked about moments like they were misfiled receipts instead of human betrayals. What if it wasn't a confession? What if it was a performance? I pulled out my phone, opened our shared calendar, scrolled back. That's when I noticed something strange, an event that had been deleted from 2 months ago. A dinner reservation at a place we never went to. But I remembered it. She'd told me she had a late pitch meeting. I believed her. I ordered Chinese food and watched documentaries about miniature trains. The reservation had been for 2. Booked under her maiden name. My heart didn't sink. It numbed, like it was tired of reacting. And just like that, a new question bloomed, terrifying in its simplicity. What else has she already rewritten? You don't realize how fragile your version of the past is until someone starts editing it without your permission. I sat in the car that night, staring at the calendar entries she thought she deleted, and I swear the silence inside that vehicle changed its shape. It wasn't just quiet, it was conspiratorial. The kind of silence you feel when something is breathing beside you that you can't see yet. My palms were sweaty, not because I was scared, but because I suddenly understood something. She had rehearsed this. The story, the breakdown, the setting, all of it. The truth wasn't slipping out of her like regret. It was being released, piece by calculated piece, as if I was being allowed access to a curated exhibit, not the whole gallery. I remembered something else then, something small but sticky. About a month ago, I was looking for her charger and opened the top drawer of her desk, normally off limits. But she wasn't home. Inside was a flash drive, unlabeled, wedged between expired gift cards and a velvet ring pouch she hadn't used since our wedding. At the time, I didn't open it. I told myself it was none of my business. Now I couldn't stop thinking about it. The flash drive, the deleted dinner, the way she said, finally. These weren't fragments. They were threads. When I got home, I went straight to that drawer. The drive was gone. Of course it was. I rifled through every drawer in the house, checked under furniture, inside coat pockets, behind books, even in the storage bin where we kept Christmas lights. Nothing. I stood in the middle of our bedroom, surrounded by the debris of my own search, and felt like I was standing in a version of my life she'd already moved out of mentally. She was somewhere else. I didn't just mean physically. I mean she was operating in a reality I hadn't been invited to. I was playing catch-up in my own marriage. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the radiator click every few minutes, like it was marking time on my failure to confront things sooner. Around 4 a.m., I gave up, walked into the kitchen, and stared at the counter where we used to make French toast together every Sunday. Staring turned to scanning. I don't even know what I was hoping to find. Crumbs of proof? DNA-level betrayal? Instead, I found a grocery receipt folded neatly beneath the fruit bowl. One I didn't recognize. I looked closer. It was dated from 3 days ago, while she was supposedly on a solo retreat in upstate New York. But the receipt was from a local store, 15 minutes from our house. And then I saw the final item. Carpet cleaner, pet stain formula. We don't have a pet. We haven't had one since Luna died. That's when my stomach twisted into something sour. Because now I wasn't just suspicious of emotional cheating. I was starting to question the physical details of our life. The apartment, the things she bought, the places she claimed to be. What was that cleaner for? Was it just a random impulse purchase? Or was someone else in our house when I wasn't? I sat on the couch, gripping the receipt like it was a crime scene photo, and slowly, a sickening theory began to form. What if I wasn't the one being paused? What if I was the placeholder? The decoy? What if this entire last year had been a carefully managed performance where I was just a character being gradually written out of the story? Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. We should talk. I think you've started to figure it out. D. I stared at the message, blinking slowly, like my brain needed time to readjust to the idea that the man she kissed wasn't just a fling or a mistake, but someone who now had access to my number. My life. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I checked the timestamp. It had been sent yesterday, and that was when I realized someone had deleted it before I ever saw it, which means someone has access to my phone. I spent the next few hours in a haze that didn't feel like exhaustion. It felt like erasure, like I was being gradually peeled out of my own life without realizing it. Nothing looked different, but everything felt wrong. I started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. My drawer of t-shirts seemed emptier, like a few had gone missing. The spice rack we both used religiously was suddenly alphabetized in the wrong direction. Lindra knew I always started with basil, not allspice. And then the most chilling one. The guest bathroom smelled faintly of a cologne I didn't own. Something earthy, with a mint note. I'd been in that bathroom dozens of times in the last week and never noticed it until now. Was that me? Was I that blind? My heart was racing in small spikes, not from panic exactly, but from the realization that this wasn't a clean betrayal. This was layered. She didn't just cheat. She restructured. Erased footprints. Covered tracks. Rewrote time. And the more I looked, the more I realized just how little of this reality I actually had control over. I went through my phone next, not the texts or calls, but the back-end stuff. Settings. App logs. Sync data. I don't know what I expected to find, but somewhere deep in the voicemail app, buried under notifications I never cleared, there was a saved message that had never been marked as played. It was dated almost 3 weeks ago. I stared at it, thumb hovering, like it might bite me. I played it. The voice on the other end wasn't hers. It was male. Calm. Soft-spoken. No identifiable accent. No greeting. Just a single sentence spoken with the kind of casual confidence that made my blood run cold. You're going to start noticing things now. Don't overreact. Click. That was it. I replayed it 3 times, hoping it would change. Hoping maybe I'd imagined it, or misheard it, or my phone had glitched. But no, it was there. Clear as day. A stranger, not threatening me, but managing me. Like I was a variable in an experiment being gently guided away from chaos. Like someone knew what I was about to uncover and wanted to frame my reaction before I had the chance to feel anything real. I called the number back immediately. Disconnected. Tried again. Same result. I stood up, pace quickening, mind racing. Was that Des? Why leave a message like that? Why not threaten me, gloat, confess? Why instruct me? Unless it wasn't about guilt. Unless it was about control. I started pulling open drawers, cabinets, looking for anything. Documents, receipts, notes, anything she might have left behind. That's when I found it. An envelope wedged between the pages of a book we hadn't touched in years. One of those minimalist design books that sat on the coffee table more as an aesthetic than literature. The envelope had no name. Inside was a photo. A printed, physical photo. It was our living room, but not as it looked now. In the photo, the layout was slightly different. There were red cushions on the couch we never owned. A mirror on the wall we never bought. And in the frame, sitting on that couch, was Lindra laughing, wearing a red dress I'd never seen before. Beside her, holding a wine glass, was the man I now knew as Des. And standing behind them, out of focus but unmistakable, was me. But I had no memory of this photo ever being taken. None. I dropped it. My knees actually gave out for a second, like something inside me short-circuited. Because there are only 2 possibilities when you see something like that. Either your memory is collapsing under the weight of denial, or someone is gaslighting you with surgical precision. And the worst part? The timestamp on the back said December 14th, 2023. That was the night my mother went into the hospital. The night I was in another state, alone, dealing with grief and fear and a 2-hour delay on I-80. So how was I in that picture? I stared at the photo like it might blink. Then I noticed something else. In the lower right corner, barely visible, was a blurred reflection in the glass of a picture frame on the far wall. Something not part of the scene. Something not facing the camera. Something, or someone, standing in the hallway, watching all of it unfold. And that someone was holding a phone, pointed right at me. I stared at that photo until the colors started to lose meaning, until my hands went numb from gripping it too tightly. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. But there I was, frozen in the background of a life I don't remember living, wearing a jacket I've never owned, in a room staged with props we never purchased, captured in a moment I would have sworn on my father's grave I wasn't present for. At first I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was photoshopped. Maybe it was some sick joke, some deep-fake experiment. But the lighting was too perfect, the depth too real. There were imperfections, a small bend in the corner of the printed paper, smudges on the coffee table in the photo, dust on the lamp base. Those aren't the kinds of details you fabricate. My brain wouldn't stop spinning. I thought back to that December night, the one marked on the photo. My mother had been admitted to the ER with blood pressure so high they thought she might stroke out. I'd driven 3 hours straight through a snowstorm to be by her side. I remember the gas station coffee, the sound of wind battering the windshield, the way the nurse had looked at me when I asked if she would be okay. All of it. Vivid, certain. So what was this photo? An alternate reality? A plant? A memory I wasn't supposed to have? I opened my laptop and searched the metadata, hoping the file would offer something. An IP address, a device, a breadcrumb. But the printout had no digital origin. It was analog. Old school. Someone wanted this to exist outside the cloud. I turned it over again. That damn reflection in the frame. That shadow in the hallway. Holding a phone. Camera pointed right where I stood. The more I looked at it, the more I began to notice something that made my scalp go cold. The shadow wasn't standing still. There was a blur around the arm, a ghostly streak that suggested motion, which meant whoever took that photo wasn't just watching. They were moving, walking toward the scene, toward me. That's when I remembered the backup drive. A year ago, I'd installed a home server in the closet of our guest room, something I used to run time-lapse camera feeds for a short film project I abandoned after 3 weeks. I never shut it down, just forgot it existed. The cameras had long since been unplugged, but the system was still quietly syncing backups of phone data, synced folders, random cloud junk Lindra never knew I mirrored. I sprinted into the guest room and dug behind dusty boxes until I found the little black box. I plugged it into my laptop and started combing through folders I hadn't touched in months. That's when I found the folder labeled science_px_archive. Inside were hundreds of snapshots, screenshots of synced phones, app previews, thumbnails of texts, photos, even voice memos. Some were mine, some were hers. One file stood out, a cropped screenshot of a video file. The name was gibberish, YX7B_recon_1214. MP4. It was from her phone. I opened it. At first, all I saw was a dim room, lit only by a single standing lamp and the flicker of some TV show in the background. Then the angle shifted, and I realized it wasn't a video taken of a room. It was screen recording from a security camera app. The footage was grainy, slightly distorted, but unmistakable. It was our living room, our furniture, our layout. Only it wasn't quite right. The rug was different. The table was swapped, but the walls were ours. The crack near the baseboard, the old dent from when we dropped the couch. This was our space, remodeled like a theater set. And then, into frame, I walked in. It was me. My gait. My posture. I even rubbed the same spot on my temple I always do when I'm thinking. But I didn't recognize the clothes. I didn't remember walking in. I didn't remember this ever happening. The video timestamp confirmed it. December 14th, 8:52 p.m. I was supposed to be hundreds of miles away. I scrubbed forward. I watched as I sat down. Des entered from the right, holding 2 glasses of wine. Lindra entered moments later in that red dress from the photo. They laughed. He laughed. They all laughed. Like friends. Like people who did this often. There was no confrontation, no tension. It looked rehearsed. That's when I hit pause and leaned back from the screen, heart jackhammering against my ribs. What was I watching? A doppelganger? A recording stage to make me question my own memory? Or had I somehow, been drugged, manipulated, puppeted into an evening I had no recollection of? Then I noticed something else. A tiny reflection in the window behind them. It was me. But not the me on the couch. Me, in the present, holding my laptop, sitting exactly where I was now. A reflection of now. But this video was recorded months ago. I slammed the laptop shut. The air in the room changed again. That charged static hum, that sense that I wasn't alone. And for the first time since this all began, I wasn't thinking about her betrayal. I wasn't even thinking about Des. I was thinking about what version of me she'd been living with. And if maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the first. It took 3 days before I could open that laptop again. 3 days of silence, of deliberately walking through each room in my house like a museum exhibit that used to mean something. I didn't speak to Lindra. I didn't answer Des's follow-up message. Yes, there was a second one. All it said was, he never asked for anything but peace. You still can. I didn't even bother trying to understand it. My thoughts had become so twisted and fragmented that I stopped trusting anything with a timestamp. But on the 3rd day, I woke up before the sun and sat down in front of that screen. I needed answers, not for her, not for him, but for me. For the part of me that still believed I hadn't completely vanished in someone else's story. I opened the archive again, this time slower, with less panic. And that's when I found something I had missed before. There was a hidden folder in the system. Encrypted, buried beneath folders of design prototypes and app cache. It was titled DX_restoration. That word, restoration, hit different. Not cold like recon or SYNC. It sounded like an apology. Or maybe a plan. Inside were a dozen voice memos. All from Lindra. The first one started with a long silence before she said, "If he ever hears these, it means I've failed. But maybe he'll also understand why I tried." They weren't love notes. They weren't confessions of infidelity. They were therapy sessions, private, self-recorded, and raw. She talked about her depression, about how she had started dissociating from her own life, about how she didn't know how to feel safe in a relationship that was built on politeness instead of passion. She described losing herself, losing me, but there was no anger in her voice, just a tired kind of grief. She admitted to crossing lines, emotional ones, physical ones, but she also said something I didn't expect. I never replaced him. I replaced the version of me I thought he needed. That line broke me open. I sat with those recordings for hours, listening to her unravel piece by piece, wishing, truly wishing, I had seen the cracks sooner. Maybe we could have talked. Maybe we could have grown together instead of apart. But in all honesty, maybe not. Maybe we just ran out of shared space. Not because we hated each other, but because we stopped trying to understand the quiet. That night, I called her. Not to fight, not to accuse, just to ask one question. Was any of it ever real? Her voice trembled when she answered. Yes. The French toast. The crossword battles. The dog. The way you used to talk in your sleep about cities you wanted to visit. That was all real. I outgrew the part of me that fit into that world. And I didn't know how to leave kindly. We talked for 2 hours. No shouting. No blame. Just two people finally taking off the masks they'd been wearing for each other. A week later, she moved out. No drama. No ultimatums. Just boxes, hugs, and a shared playlist we promised not to delete. Des was never mentioned again. And here's the part one never thought I'd write. I forgave her. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But slowly, like letting your eyes adjust to a new kind of light. Now, months later, I'm living in a small apartment above a bookstore. The irony doesn't escape me. The owner's name is Fiona. She leaves fresh coffee in a thermos by the counter every morning. Sometimes she forgets the lid. I don't mind. Life isn't tidy anymore. But it's real. It's quiet in the good way. I started painting again. Badly. But it's mine. And every now and then, I still think about the version of me in that photo. But I don't fear him anymore. I don't wonder what he remembers. Because for the first time in a long time, I know who I am. And I'm not going anywhere.